I'd been paying nearly $38,000 a year for family vacations without even getting a vote on the destination. Then last Sunday, Dad raised his glass and said, "My children and I were not invited because we would just slow them down." I smiled and told them to have fun. They did not realize I controlled the credit card they were planning to use. By the time their transaction declined at the international gate, I was already buckling my kids into seats on a flight headed the opposite way. My name is Aurora Evans, and for the last decade of my life, I have been defined by a single, unwritten role within my family. I am the safety net. I am the silent investor. I am the person they call when the bill arrives and the math does not add up. But as I sat on the uncomfortable metal chair near Gate 42, watching my phone vibrate violently against the hard surface of the table, I knew that role had just been extinguished. The screen lit up with a photo of my mother, her smiling face mocking the absolute chaos I knew was unfolding 3 terminals away. The phone buzzed again and again. It was a relentless, mechanical seizure. First Mom, then my sister Kendra, then my brother Trent, then Dad. It was a digital firing squad, and I was the target. I let it ring for exactly 3 cycles before I picked it up. I did not say hello. I did not need to. "Transaction declined," my mother's voice shrieked. The sound distortion so sharp I had to pull the device away from my ear. I could hear the distinct, echoing hum of the international terminal in the background, the squeak of luggage wheels, and the low murmur of hundreds of travelers, but mostly, I heard her panic. "Aurora, did you hear me?" The woman at the counter just said transaction declined, loudly, in front of everyone. I took a slow sip of my lukewarm coffee. "I heard you, Mom. Well, fix it," she snapped, her voice cracking with the specific kind of desperation that comes from public embarrassment. "There is a line behind us. Aurora, a line. People are staring. Mrs. Gable from the church is 2 rows back. Do you understand what you're doing? You are humiliating us." There was a scuffle on the other end, the sound of a hand grasping plastic, and then the breathing changed. It was heavier, controlled, and icy. It was my father. "Aurora," he said. He did not shout. My father never shouted when he wanted to be terrifying. He only lowered his volume until you had to lean in to be cut by the words. "Turn the card back on." Immediately, I looked up from the phone. Across the small waiting area, my husband, Evan, was organizing our carry-on bags. He paused, his eyes locking onto mine. He looked tired. Not the sleepy kind of tired, but the kind of exhaustion that seeps into your bones after years of watching someone you love be treated like an automated teller machine. He raised his eyebrows slightly. A silent question. "Are you sure?" I nodded at him, a microscopic movement, before returning my gaze to my children. Henry, my 13-year-old, was sitting on his suitcase, aggressively tapping at a game on his tablet. He was wearing his favorite hoodie. The hood pulled up over his head. He was trying to look tough, trying to look like he did not care, but I could see the rim of his eyes. They were red. He had heard what his grandfather said at dinner last night. He knew exactly why we were not going to Europe. Sophie, who had just turned 10, was clutching her travel neck pillow like it was a stuffed animal. She was staring out the window at the tarmac, watching the baggage handlers toss suitcases onto the conveyor belt. She looked small, smaller than 10, and Jasper, my sweet 6-year-old, was swinging his legs back and forth, blissfully unaware of the tension radiating through the airwaves. He looked up at me, his eyes wide and trusting. "Mommy, we are really going to the beach, right? The one with the monkeys?" "Yes, baby," I whispered, covering the microphone. "We are really going to the beach." "Aurora!" My father's voice barked in my ear, snapping my attention back. "I am not going to repeat myself. The agent is waiting. We have 5 minutes before they close the gate. Authorization code. Now." I took a breath. It felt different than any breath I had taken in 41 years. It felt clean. "No," I said. The silence on the other end was deafening. It lasted only 2 seconds, but it felt like an hour. "Excuse me?" Dad asked, his tone dropping another octave. I said no, I repeated, keeping my voice steady, though my hand was trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of finally stepping off the ledge I had been standing on for years. You told me last night that my children and I would just slow you down. You were very clear. Dad, you said this trip was for the family, but not for us. So, I am respecting your decision. I am letting you go to Europe on your own. You are being petulant, he hissed. This is about money. This is petty. We raised you better than this. It is not about money, I lied. It was about money, but not in the way he thought. It was about the weaponization of money. I told you at dinner, I said, have fun. I meant it. The card, he demanded, his composure starting to crack. We cannot check the bags without the card. Aurora, the upgrades, the lounge access, it is all linked to your account. I know, I said. And since I am not going, neither is my credit. You ungrateful little... I pulled the phone away from my ear, just as his voice began to rise into a shout. I looked at the screen. The call timer read 2 minutes and 14 seconds. That was enough. I looked at Evan again. He had stopped organizing the bags. He was standing still, his hand resting protectively on Henry's shoulder. He looked at me with a mixture of pride and sorrow. He knew what this cost me. He knew I had spent my entire adult life trying to buy their approval, trying to earn a seat at a table where the chairs were bolted to the floor, facing away from me. Em? Evan asked softly. It is done, I said. I looked down at the phone one last time. I opened the family group chat. It was flooding with messages. Kendra, pick up the phone. Are you insane? Trent, this isn't funny. Aurora, Dad is going to have a heart attack. Mom, please, just turn it on. We can talk about this later. I typed a single message. My thumbs moved with precision. Have a safe flight. Enjoy Europe. I hit send. Then, I swiped down the settings menu and tapped the airplane icon. The signal bars vanished. The Wi-Fi symbol disappeared. The vibrations stopped. The frantic energy of my family, the guilt trips, the manipulation, the demands. It all cut off instantly, severed by a single digital switch. The silence that followed was heavy, but it was not empty. It was filled with the sound of the terminal announcements and the quiet chatter of strangers. Okay, I said, standing up and smoothing down the front of my jacket. I felt light, terrifyingly light. Okay, let's go. Henry looked up from his tablet. Is Grandpa mad? He asked. His voice was cracked, caught somewhere between childhood and the deep baritone of adolescence. I walked over to him and knelt down so I was eye level. I did not want to lie to him. We had done enough lying in this family to last 3 generations. Grandpa is angry. Yes, I said, brushing a piece of hair out of his eyes. He is angry because he is used to me paying for things, but I am not going to pay for them to treat you like you do not matter. I am not doing it anymore. Henry, never again. Henry held my gaze for a long moment. He saw the truth in my face. He saw that I was not just saying words to make him feel better. He nodded. Once, sharp and quick, he put his tablet in his backpack and stood up. He stood a little taller than he had 5 minutes ago. Sophie slid off her chair, dragging her neck pillow. She didn't ask anything. She just walked over and took my hand, squeezing it tight. She let out a long breath, a sigh that sounded too old for her small lungs, as if she had been holding it in since the dinner last night. We walked toward our gate, Gate B14, destination, San Jose, Costa Rica. As we handed our boarding passes to the attendant, I thought about my parents standing at the international check-in counter. I pictured the line of people behind them, shifting impatiently. I pictured the agent, polite but firm, explaining that the card was invalid. I imagined my father reaching for his own wallet, the one he had not opened for a family expense in years, and realizing he did not have the limit to cover the luxury tour he had booked. But they did not know the half of it. They thought this was just a tantrum. They thought I had simply turned off the card to be spiteful. They had no idea that I knew the truth about the Europe trip. They didn't know that I had seen the invoices for the concierge services. They didn't know I had tracked the business expenses they were planning to write off. And they certainly didn't know that while they were standing there, arguing with an airline employee, I had already gathered enough financial records to bury them. The trip to Europe was built on my money. Yes, but the house they lived in, the cars they drove, and the lifestyle they flaunted, that was all built on a house of cards. And I had just pulled the bottom one out. To understand why I left my parents standing at a check-in counter with a declined credit card, you have to go back exactly 48 hours. You have to sit at the mahogany dining table in the house where I grew up, a sprawling colonial in Cedar Hollow that smelled of lemon polish and old expectations. It was Sunday night. Sunday nights were mandatory. If you missed a Sunday dinner, you were subjected to a week of passive-aggressive voicemails from my mother about how lonely the house felt and how we never know how much time we have left. So, we were there, all of us. The atmosphere was different that evening. Usually, these dinners were a chaotic mix of my children asking to be excused and my father complaining about the government. But tonight, the lights were dimmed. My mother had lit the tall, tapered candles in the center of the table, the ones she usually saved for Thanksgiving or the arrival of the new parish priest. The flames flickered against the crystal wine glasses that I had bought them for their 40th anniversary. My sister, Kendra, was already setting the stage. She had her phone propped up against a centerpiece of artificial hydrangeas, the camera lens facing the head of the table. She was checking her hair in the reflection, practicing that open-mouthed, surprised smile she used for her thumbnails. She looked at me and winked, but it was not a conspiratorial wink. It was the kind of wink a magician gives to the audience before sawing a woman in half. She knew the trick. I did not. Across from me, my brother Trent was leaning back in his chair, swirling his Cabernet. He had a half-smile plastered on his face, the look of a man who had read the last page of the book and was waiting for everyone else to catch up. He caught my eye and raised his glass slightly, not in a toast, but in a gesture that felt oddly like a farewell. "All right, everyone," my father said. He stood up. The room went silent. Even the kids stopped fidgeting. My father loved an audience. He tapped his spoon against his glass, a sharp, piercing chime that cut through the low hum of the air conditioner. "I have an announcement, a big one." My mother clasped her hands together under her chin, beaming. She looked at the grandchildren with a wet, glistening gaze that usually preceded a speech about family legacy. "Your mother and I have been thinking," Dad continued, his chest puffing out slightly. "We have been thinking about time, about memories, about what we leave behind." I took a sip of water. I felt a knot of anxiety tighten in my stomach. Usually, when Dad talked about what we leave behind, it ended with me writing a check to fix the roof or pay for a new transmission for Trent's car. "So," Dad announced, his voice booming with theatrical generosity, "we have decided to take the family to Europe." The reaction was instantaneous. "No way!" Henry shouted, dropping his fork. "Europe?" Sophie gasped, her eyes going wide. "Like Paris? Like where the Eiffel Tower is?" "I want to see a castle," Jasper squealed, clapping his sticky hands together. For 3 seconds, the room was filled with pure, unadulterated joy. I felt a surge of relief, a family trip. Maybe this was it. Maybe this was the moment they finally included us, finally acknowledged that we were part of this unit. I started to smile. I started to calculate how many vacation days I had left at the store. I started to think about passports. Then, my father held up a hand. The silence returned. But this time, it was heavy. It was sharp. He pointed a finger down the table. Not at everyone, at me. "But not you. Aurora," he said. The words hung in the air like smoke. He did not say it with regret. He did not say it with an apology. He said it with the same casual tone one uses to order a side of fries. "And not the kids," he added, gesturing vaguely at my 3 children who were still frozen in their moment of celebration. You understand, do you not? It is a 2-week tour. High pace, lots of walking, museums, vineyards. He took a sip of his wine, savoring the vintage. You will just slow us down. With the little ones, well, it is just too much hassle. You understand. I felt the blood drain from my face. It was not a slow seep. It was a sudden evacuation. I felt cold in my fingertips. My mother then reached under the table and pulled out a heavy canvas tote bag. She began to distribute the envelopes. They were navy blue, thick, expensive cardstock with gold foil lettering. I recognized the brand. It was the same stationery company I used for my business invitations. She slid the first one to Kendra. For you, darling, Mom cooed. And for your boyfriend, if he can get the time off. Kendra squealed, grabbing the envelope and holding it up for her phone's camera, making sure to capture the gold lettering. Mom slid the next one to Trent. For you, son. And we upgraded your seat to business class. We know your back gives you trouble. Trent nodded, tearing his open to reveal a leather passport cover and a personalized luggage tag. Then Mom placed 2 more envelopes in front of herself and Dad. She did not slide anything to me. She did not slide anything to Henry. She did not slide anything to Sophie. She did not slide anything to Jasper. The space on the tablecloth in front of my children remained bare. The white linen seemed to glare at me, bright and empty. I looked at Sophie. She was staring at her hands. She had curled her fingers into tight fists, resting them on her empty placemat. She looked like she had just been slapped. She was 10 years old enough to understand the mechanics of cruelty, but young enough to still be shocked by it coming from her own grandparents. She blinked rapidly, fighting back tears, trying to make herself disappear. Then I felt a tug on my sleeve. It was Jasper, my sweet, innocent 6-year-old. He leaned in close to me, his voice a trembling whisper that broke my heart into a million jagged pieces. "Mommy," he whispered, "did I do something wrong? Is it because I spilled the juice last time?" The room was silent. Everyone was watching me. Kendra had stopped filming, but the phone was still up. Trent was watching over the rim of his glass. My parents were waiting. They were waiting for the explosion. They were waiting for me to beg. They were waiting for me to ask why, to plead my case, to offer to pay for a nanny, to offer to drive a separate car, to do anything to buy my way back into their love. They expected the Aurora who had paid for the roof, the Aurora who had paid for the cars, the Aurora who had paid for the anniversary parties. But that Aurora had just died at the dinner table. I looked at my father. He looked smug. He felt powerful. He thought he was teaching me a lesson about hierarchy. I looked at the envelopes. I knew, with a sickening certainty, who was paying for the contents of those envelopes. I knew whose credit limit was supporting this grand European tour. I slowly picked up my knife and fork. I placed them side by side on my plate, the silver clicking softly against the china. It was a sound of finality. I did not scream. I did not flip the table. I did not cry. I lifted my head and looked my father dead in the eye. I summoned every ounce of composure I had built over 40 years of surviving this family. I forced the corners of my mouth up into a smile. It was not a happy smile. It was a polite smile. It was the smile of a banker foreclosing on a home. "Oh," I said. My voice was steady. It did not shake. "Is that so? All right." "I am glad you are being reasonable," Dad said, relaxing his shoulders, clearly relieved he didn't have to deal with a scene. "We will bring you back some chocolates, or maybe a keychain." "That would be lovely," I said. "And hey," Trent chimed in, "you can house sit while we are gone. Make sure the plants do not die." "Of course," I said. "Have fun." I turned to my children. "Eat up, guys. We are leaving as soon as you are done." I watched them eat. I watched my parents discuss their itinerary: Rome, Florence, the Amalfi Coast. I listened to them talk about the 5-star hotels and the private tours. I listened to them spend my money in front of my face while my children sat there. believing they were not good enough to be included. I let them enjoy the appetizer. I let them enjoy the main course. I let them bask in their cruelty, because I knew something they did not. The credit card bill for the deposit was due on Tuesday, the flight was on Sunday, and the card they were all relying on. The card that was currently sitting in my father's wallet had my name on the account as the primary holder. I took a bite of my roast beef. It was dry. But as I chewed, I tasted something else. I tasted the absolute, undeniable sweetness of the future. "More wine, Dad?" I asked, reaching for the bottle. "Please," he said. Holding out his glass, I poured. I filled it to the brim. "To family," I said. "To family." They chorused. I drank my water, and I started counting down the hours. To understand the sheer mechanics of how a 41-year-old woman allows her parents to treat her like an unlimited line of credit. You have to look at the slow, insidious erosion of boundaries. It does not happen overnight. You do not wake up one morning and decide to fund a luxury lifestyle for people who barely tolerate your children. It happens in increments. It happens in $5 favors that turn into $500 emergencies, which eventually mutate into $5,000 expectations. My name is Aurora Evans. I live in Cleveland, Ohio. I am the mother of 3 beautiful, intelligent children. I am also the co-owner of Iron Marrow Supply, a construction and industrial material business that I built from the ground up with my partner. I spend my days negotiating contracts with union foremen, managing supply chains for steel beams, and staring down contractors who think they can overcharge me because I am a woman in a hard-hat industry. I am not a pushover. In my professional life, I am known as a shark. But in my father's house, I was simply the wallet. It started 10 years ago. Right around the time Evan and I bought into the business, Dad called me, his voice tight with a manufactured sort of panic. He said his pension distribution had been delayed due to a clerical error at the state level. He needed to cover the property tax, just for a month, until the paperwork cleared. I wrote the check. I felt proud to do it. I felt like a good daughter. Then it was a transmission repair for my brother Trent, because he needed his car to get to a job interview for a job he never actually landed. Then it was a security deposit for my sister Kendra's apartment because she was going through a rough patch with her then-boyfriend. Then it became, "Aurora, we are a family. We help each other." That phrase became the mantra. It was the password that unlocked my bank account. But the definition of help shifted. It stopped being about emergencies and started being about comfort. I sat in my home office the night after the dinner, looking at the spreadsheet I had secretly maintained for the last 3 years. I called it the family ledger. I had never shown it to Evan. I was too ashamed. Last year alone, I had paid for nearly $38,000 in expenses for my parents and siblings. It was not a lump sum. If it had been a lump sum, I might have stopped it sooner. It was death by 1,000 swipes. It was the airline tickets for my parents' anniversary trip to Arizona because you have all those miles. Aurora. It was the hotel suite upgrade because Mom's arthritis acts up in a standard room. It was the travel insurance. It was the baggage fees. It was the dinners out where the check would arrive, and everyone would suddenly find something incredibly interesting to look at on the ceiling. Leaving the black folio sitting by my elbow, they stopped asking 3 years ago. That was the turning point. I had added Dad as an authorized user on my primary rewards card, the black card, for emergencies only. He never gave it back, and I never asked for it back. The card became a utility to them. It was like electricity or running water. You do not thank the power company for keeping the lights on. You just flip the switch and expect illumination. But the money was not the part that kept me up at night. I could make more money. Iron Marrow was doing well. The part that carved a hollow space in my chest was what I bought with that money. I was buying proximity. I was paying a subscription fee to be part of the Evans family, and the service I was receiving was terrible. I scrolled through my phone, looking at photos from 6 months ago. It was Grandkids' Day at the local zoo. My mother had posted an album on social media. The cover photo was a beautifully framed shot of Kendra's 2 daughters and Trent's son. Standing in front of the lion enclosure, they were wearing matching Safari Squad t-shirts. They were holding $20 souvenir cups filled with slushies. My children were not in the photo. We lived 20 minutes away. We were home that Saturday. We were not invited. When I had asked Mom about it later, she had waved her hand dismissively and said, "Oh, it was a last-minute thing, and we know how busy you are with the business. We did not want to bother me." I looked at the receipts from that day on my credit card statement. 6 tickets, 4 souvenir cups, lunch at the Rainforest Cafe. I had paid for the very outing my children were excluded from. It was a pattern that repeated itself with agonizing precision. When Kendra's daughter recited a poem at school, my parents were in the front row with bouquets of flowers. When Henry won the regional science fair, my dad said, "That is nice, kid," and turned back to the television. They called Kendra's kids prodigies. They called Trent's son a future athlete. They called my children cute. Cute is a filler word. It is what you say when you have no interest in digging deeper. It is the polite nod you give to a stranger's dog. Evan had seen it. My husband is a quiet man, a man who builds furniture with his hands and speaks only when he has something to say. For years, he had bitten his tongue. He saw me writing the checks. He saw me swallowing the insults. He respected my need to please them, even if he hated the people I was pleasing. But at that dinner, when Dad had pointed his finger and said, "You will just slow us down," something in Evan had snapped. He had leaned over to me, his breath warm against my ear, and whispered the truest sentence I had ever heard. "Aurora," he had said, his voice low and vibrating with suppressed anger. "They are teaching our kids that love is a transaction. They are teaching Henry and Sophie that they only matter if you pay the admission fee. And even when you pay it, they are still waiting in the lobby." I sat there in my office, the silence of the house wrapping around me. The blue light of the laptop screen illuminated the rows and columns of the spreadsheet. $38,000. That was a year of college tuition. That was a down payment on a rental property. That was a retirement contribution. And what had I gotten for it? I had gotten a seat at a dinner table where I was told I was a burden. The realization hit me not with a bang, but with the cold, hard click of a lock sliding into place. The trip to Europe was not just a vacation, it was a power play. My father wanted the status of taking the whole family abroad. He wanted the photos for his friends at the country club. He wanted to look like the benevolent patriarch who provided for his brood. But he did not have the money. He needed my money to paint that portrait. He wanted my financial resources, but he did not want the inconvenience of my physical presence. He wanted the credit limit, but he did not want the baggage of my 3 children who might need to stop for a bathroom break or who might get tired walking through the Louvre. He was stripping me for parts. I closed the laptop. I did not feel the hot flush of anger that usually accompanies a fight. I did not feel the urge to scream or throw things. I felt something much worse. I felt clear. For 41 years, I had been looking at my family through a fog of guilt and obligation. I had viewed every slight as an accident, every expense as a necessity. I had made excuses for them because the alternative, admitting that they used me, was too painful to bear. But the fog was gone. I looked at the phone on my desk. I picked it up. I did not call them to yell. I did not send a long, emotional text message explaining my feelings. They did not deserve my feelings. My feelings were a currency they had devalued long ago. I stared at the wall, my eyes focusing on a picture of my 3 children laughing on a beach in Florida, a trip we had taken just the 5 of us, paid for with my own money, where no one made them feel like they were slowing anyone down. I was not angry. Anger is a hot emotion. Anger burns out. Anger makes you messy and impulsive. I was cold. I was calculated. I was exactly the businesswoman I was at Iron Marrow Supply. I was about to conduct a business meeting, and in this meeting, I was the one holding the leverage. Clarity is a dangerous thing. When you finally see people for who they are, rather than who you want them to be, you stop negotiating. You stop compromising. You simply close the account. The house was quiet. It was the kind of heavy, pressurized silence that settles in after a storm has passed, leaving only the wreckage behind. The children were asleep upstairs. I had checked on them twice, lingering in the doorway of Jasper's room, watching the slow rise and fall of his chest. He was clutching a plastic dinosaur, dreaming of a world simpler than the one he had been subjected to at dinner. I sat at the kitchen island, the cold quartz countertop pressing against my forearms. My laptop was open, the screen glowing with a stark blue light that cut through the dim room. Evan walked in. He did not ask if I wanted wine. He knew me too well. Alcohol is for numbing, and I did not want to be numb. I wanted to be sharp. I wanted to be surgical. He placed a steaming mug of black tea next to my hand. The ceramic made a soft thud against the stone. It was a sound of solidarity. He pulled out the stool next to me and sat down, saying nothing, simply acting as a witness to what I was about to do. I logged into the banking portal, the interface loaded, displaying the familiar logos and the summary of accounts. I clicked on the primary credit card account, the one with the high limit, the one that offered travel rewards, the one that had become the unofficial endowment fund for the Evans family. I navigated to the Authorized Users tab. There they were, Robert Evans, Martha Evans, seeing their names typed out in the clean, sans serif font of the bank's website gave me a pause, not a hesitation of conscience, but a moment of recognition. I looked at the recent activity associated with their cards. It was a ticker tape of betrayal. There was a charge from yesterday for a high-end luggage retailer, $1,200. They had bought new suitcases. There was a charge for an expedited passport service, $400. There was the deposit for the tour company, $3,000. But then my eyes caught something else. A charge from 3 days ago, before the dinner, before the announcement. Romano VIP Concierge Services, $500. Hotel Grand Bretagne, Junior Suite Upgrade, $800. I stared at the numbers. They were not just going to Europe. They were going to Europe in style. They were upgrading their rooms. They were hiring private concierges. They were planning to parade around Italy and France, living a life of luxury, funded entirely by the daughter they had just discarded. They wanted the champagne lifestyle, but they wanted to leave the financier back in Ohio. They booked a suite, I said, my voice flat. I pointed at the screen. They used my card to upgrade to a suite. Evan looked at the screen, his jaw tightening. They wanted to be comfortable, he said, the sarcasm dripping from his words. It is a long trip, Aurora. It is a trip they cannot afford, I corrected. I moved the cursor. It hovered over the trash can icon next to my father's name. The bank's website threw up a dialog box. Are you sure you want to remove Robert Evans as an authorized user? This will permanently disable their card effective immediately. I looked at my hand. It was trembling. I watched my own fingers vibrate slightly against the trackpad. It was not fear. I was not afraid of them anymore. It was the physiological reaction of a muscle being used in a way it never had been before. For decades, my reflex had been to give, to fix, to smooth over. Pulling back required breaking a lifetime of conditioning. It was the tremor of a withdrawal symptom. I was withdrawing my consent to be used. I clicked yes. The screen refreshed. Robert Evans was gone. I moved to my mother's name, Martha Evans. Are you sure? I clicked yes. The screen refreshed again. The list was empty. It was just me, Aurora Evans, the only person who actually paid the bill. But the digital removal was not enough. I needed to be sure. I picked up my phone and dialed the number on the back of my own card. It was 11:15 at night, but the Platinum service line was 24 hours. Thank you for calling, a bright, professional voice answered after 2 rings. This is Sarah. How can I help you? Mrs. Evans? Hi, Sarah, I said. I just removed 2 authorized users from my account online, but I need to ensure the physical cards in their possession are deactivated immediately. I do not want there to be any lag time for pending authorizations. I can certainly help with that, Sarah said. I could hear the clicking of her keyboard. I see the changes here. The cards are marked as inactive. However, for security, we usually recommend destroying the cards. Do you have the secondary cards in your possession? I looked at Evan. He was watching me intently. No, I said clearly. I do not have the cards. That is the problem. That is why I'm calling. There was a brief pause on the line. Sarah understood. She did not ask for details, but her tone shifted from customer service polite to security serious. Understood. Mrs. Evans, I am placing a hard block on those specific card numbers. If anyone attempts to swipe them or use them for a new transaction, the terminal will return a declined message and a request to confiscate the card, though merchants rarely do that anymore, but the transaction will not go through. Good, I said. Thank you. Is there anything else? Yes, I said. I want to set up a transaction alert. Any transaction, of any amount, anywhere in the world. I want a text message and an email immediately. Set. And please lower my daily cash advance limit to 0. Done. You are all set, Mrs. Evans. I hung up. I placed the phone face down on the counter. It felt like I had just armed a perimeter fence. I looked back at the laptop. I changed the password to the banking portal. Then I changed the password to my email. Then I enabled two-factor authentication for everything. I spent the next 20 minutes locking down my digital life, closing every window they might try to crawl through. I sat back, exhaling a breath I felt like I had been holding since Sunday. Evan reached out and covered my hand with his. His palm was rough, warm, and grounding. You did it, he said softly. I did, I replied. They will find out when they try to check in. They will, he agreed. Then he paused. He looked toward the ceiling, toward the rooms where our children were sleeping. So, we are not going to Europe. What do you want to do for the kids? We have the time off. We have the vacation days. I looked at him. I thought about Henry's red eyes. I thought about Sophie clutching her pillow. I thought about Jasper asking if he had done something wrong. I did not want to take them to a museum. I did not want to drag them through cathedrals or force them to appreciate culture in a stuffy suit. I wanted them to be free. I wanted them to be loud. I wanted them to be in a place where no one was shushing them or telling them to stand up straight for a photo. I want to give them a place where they do not have to beg to belong, I said. The words came out spontaneously, but they felt like a manifesto. I opened a new tab on my browser. I typed in a travel website. Costa Rica, I said. Evan smiled. The monkeys? The monkeys, I confirmed. And the rainforest, and the beach, and ziplining. I want them to scream at the top of their lungs and have it be a good thing. I logged into my business rewards account. I had accumulated hundreds of thousands of points from years of buying lumber and steel for Iron Marrow. I had been saving them. I did not know what for. Until now. I found a resort in the Papagayo Peninsula. It was not pretentious. It was embedded in the jungle. It had 3 pools and direct beach access. I selected a family villa, ocean view, breakfast included. I moved to the checkout screen. The total was $0. Just points. Points I had earned with my own sweat, my own stress, my own labor. I clicked Book Now. The confirmation screen popped up. Your trip to Costa Rica is confirmed. We leave on Sunday, I told Evan. Same day they do, but we are going south. Evan squeezed my hand. They are going to love it. They deserve it, I said. I picked up my phone to check the time. It was almost midnight. As soon as the screen lit up, a notification banner slid down from the top. It was from the bank app. It was a red alert icon. Transaction alert. Attempted cash advance. Amount, $500. Location, ATM, Cedar Hollow Gas. Go. Status, declined. I stared at the message. My blood ran cold. It was almost midnight on a Tuesday. My parents were not at home in bed. They were at a gas station 3 miles from their house. trying to pull cash out of an ATM using my credit card. They were testing the waters. Or maybe they needed cash for something they didn't want a paper trail for. Or maybe they just assumed that even at midnight, my money was their money. "What is it?" Evan asked. Seeing the look on my face, I turned the phone so he could see the screen. "They are trying to get cash," I whispered. Right now. The battle had not waited until the airport. It had started tonight, and I had fired the first shot without even leaving my kitchen. The morning of our departure did not feel like an escape. It felt like a calibration. There was no chaotic rushing, no screaming about forgotten toothbrushes, no performance of happiness for social media. It was quiet. It was just me, kneeling on the hardwood floor of the entryway, tying the double knot on Jasper's sneakers. "Tight enough, buddy?" I asked. "Yep," he said, wiggling his toes. "Ready for the monkeys?" I stood up and adjusted Sophie's sun hat. She stood still, letting me fix the brim, her eyes scanning my face for any sign of the stress she was used to seeing on travel days. Usually, by this hour, I would be sweating, fielding calls from my mother about whether I had packed her special orthopedic pillow or if I had printed the boarding passes for her, Dad, Kendra, and Trent. But today, my phone was in my pocket, and for the first time in forever, the screen was dark. We drove to the airport in a calm that felt almost illicit. When we walked through the terminal, we were not a support staff for a larger, louder entity. We were just a family of 5. However, technology has a way of piercing even the thickest armor. We boarded our plane. It was a smaller jet, heading for a connection in Houston before the jump to Costa Rica. As I settled into seat 12A, the cabin crew began their safety checks. I pulled my phone out to switch it to airplane mode, intending to disconnect from the world completely. That was when the dam broke. The timing was impeccable, almost cinematic. It was as if the universe had waited for my parents to reach the front of their line at the international terminal, get rejected, and then unleash their fury exactly as I was buckling my seatbelt. My phone did not just ring, it convulsed. The screen lit up with a barrage of notifications that stacked on top of each other so fast I could barely read the names. Incoming call. Mom. Missed call. Dad. Message from Kendra. What is going on? Message from Trent. Pick up the phone. Aurora. Incoming call. Mom. Incoming call. Mom. It was a coordinated assault. A full frontal attack from the people who had claimed I was slowing them down, but now seemed desperate to catch up to me. I did not answer. I let the vibrations buzz against my palm, a physical manifestation of their panic. I waited until the voicemail icon appeared, indicating that Mom had left a message, against my better judgment, or perhaps because I needed one final confirmation that I was doing the right thing. I lifted the phone to my ear and pressed play. I did not have to put it on speaker. Her voice was so shrill it leaked out of the earpiece. "Aurora!" She was not crying. She was screaming. It was a low, guttural scream of social terror. "You are humiliating us. Do you hear me? The card is not working." The man said declined. He said it out loud. "Mrs. Gable is standing right there. She is watching us. Fix this. Fix this right now. You are making a scene." I listened to the entire message. She did not ask if I was okay. She did not ask if the kids were okay. She did not apologize for saying we were burdens. She did not say she missed us. She only cared that Mrs. Gable, a neighbor she secretly despised, was watching her credit limit fail. She was worried about the audience, not the daughter. I deleted the message. Then I opened the text from Kendra, my younger sister, the one whose apartment deposit I had paid, the one whose children I bought clothes for. Kendra, are you sick? Is this some kind of sick joke? We are standing here like idiots. Dad is turning purple. Turn the money back on. We have content to shoot. I laughed. It was a short, dry sound that startled the passenger in 12B. Content to shoot. That was her concern. Her Instagram feed was in jeopardy. I typed a reply. My fingers were steady. I did not type an explanation. I did not justify my actions. I did not remind them of the $38,000 a year. I typed 2 words, "Have fun." I hit send. Then I reached up and tapped the airplane icon. The signal bars vanished. The noise stopped. The invisible cord that had tethered me to their demands for 40 years was severed. I looked over at Evan in the aisle seat. He had seen the phone blowing up. He had seen the look on my face. He did not say good job or cheer. He knew this was not a victory lap. It was a funeral for a relationship I had tried to keep on life support for too long. He simply reached across the armrest and placed his hand over mine. He squeezed it once, firmly. It was an anchor. "Mom?" I turned. Henry was sitting in the window seat. His knees pulled up to his chest. He had his headphones around his neck. He was looking at me with those sharp, observant eyes that missed nothing. "Yeah, Bud?" I asked. "Is Grandma mad?" he asked. His voice was quiet, barely audible over the hum of the jet engines spooling up. I looked at my son. At 13, he was at that precarious age where he was starting to understand the complexities of adult relationships but still craved the security of childhood. He deserved the truth. I could not give him the sanitized, "everything is fine" lie anymore. That lie was what had gotten us here. I unbuckled my seatbelt for a second and leaned in close to him, ignoring the flight attendant who was making her way down the aisle checking overhead bins. "Yes, Henry," I said, keeping my voice low and steady. "Grandma is very mad." "Because we aren't going?" he asked. "No," I said. "Grandma is mad because she is used to me paying for things. She is used to me writing checks so they can have fun. But last night, they decided that you, me, Sophie, and Jasper were not important enough to be there. They said we were a burden." Henry looked down at his sneakers. "I heard Grandpa say that." "I know you did," I said, and I felt a fierce wave of protectiveness rise in my chest. "And that is why we are not paying for them anymore. I am not going to use our family's money to fund a vacation for people who make you feel like you do not belong. If they think we are a burden, they can carry their own bags." Henry looked up. He studied my face, looking for any sign of wavering. He saw none. He saw his mother, who usually apologized for taking up space, finally claiming her ground. He nodded. It was a slow, thoughtful nod. "Okay," he said. "Good." "Good," I repeated. I looked across the aisle at Sophie. She was drawing in her sketchbook. She had her new sun hat on, even though we were inside the plane. She looked up and caught my eye. Usually, when there was family tension, Sophie would cry. She was my sensitive soul, the barometer of the household's emotional pressure. But she was not crying. She let out a long, loud breath. It was a sigh that seemed to deflate her entire small body, releasing tension she must have been carrying since Sunday night. She smiled at me, a real, genuine smile, and went back to drawing. She looked lighter. She looked like a child who realized she did not have to perform for an audience that would never clap for her. The plane lurched forward. The pilot came over the intercom, announcing our departure for Houston. The engines roared, pushing us back into our seats. As the wheels left the ground, I felt a physical separation. We were rising above Ohio, above Cedar Hollow, above the toxicity of a house that valued credit scores over bloodlines. I closed my eyes and imagined my parents at the gate, realizing that the Bank of Aurora had not just closed for the day, it had been demolished. We flew for 3 hours. I slept. It was the first deep sleep I had had in years. When we landed in Houston for our layover, the illusion of peace was shattered the moment we reconnected with the digital world. We were sitting at a cafe near our connecting gate, waiting for our flight to Liberia, Costa Rica. I ordered smoothies for the kids and coffee for Evan and me. I decided to turn my phone's Wi-Fi back on, just to check the confirmation for the rental car in Costa Rica. As soon as the connection established, the phone pinged. It was not a text from my family. I had blocked their numbers during the flight. It was an email notification, but it was not from the airline, and it was not from the hotel. It was from a credit monitoring service, one of the identity protection layers I had installed late last night. Alert. New credit inquiry. Detected. I frowned, tapping the notification to open the app. My heart started to hammer against my ribs. A credit inquiry meant someone was applying for credit in my name. I read the details. Type: new credit card application, bank, National Trust. Applicant name: Aurora Evans. Status: pending review. Location of application: IP: Cedar Hollow, Ohio. I stared at the screen. The air in the terminal seemed to drop 10 degrees. They had not just tried to use the card, they had realized the authorized user cards were dead. They had realized the cash advance was blocked. So, standing there in the airport, or perhaps from the Uber ride back home, someone, my father, my mother, or maybe Trent, had tried to open a brand new credit card using my social security number and my maiden name information. They were desperate. They were panicked. And they had just crossed the line from being ungrateful family members to being federal criminals. I showed the screen to Evan. He read it. His face went hard. "They are trying to open a new one," he said, his voice cold. "Yes," I said. "They are trying to steal my identity because they cannot imagine a world where they do not have access to my money." I did not panic. I did not cry. I pressed the button on the app that said, "Report as fraud." Then I looked at the timestamp. The application had been submitted 20 minutes ago. "They are not going to stop," I told Evan. "Neither are we," he said. I picked up my smoothie. I took a sip. It tasted like mango and resolve. "Let's go to Costa Rica," I said. "I have some phone calls to make when we get to the jungle." The air in Costa Rica was heavy, but it was a different kind of weight than the suffocating pressure of my parents' dining room. It was thick with humidity, the smell of salt spray, and the sweet, fermenting scent of fallen mangoes. We had arrived at the villa late in the afternoon. A secluded house perched on a hillside overlooking the Pacific, accessible only by a dirt road that wound through a canopy of green so bright it looked artificial. For the first hour, I did not unpack. I just stood on the teak deck, letting the heat seep into my skin, melting away the icy tension that had lived in my shoulders for a decade. "Mom, look! Look at the water!" Jasper's voice broke my trance. He was pressing his face against the glass railing, pointing frantically at the horizon where the ocean turned a deep, bruising violet under the setting sun. "I see it, baby," I said, walking over to him. He looked up at me, his eyes wide, then he frowned slightly, tilting his head. "You look different, Mommy." "Different how?" I asked, brushing the hair off his sweaty forehead. "You are not holding your phone," he said, "and your shoulders are not up by your ears." I froze. Children are the most terrifyingly accurate mirrors in the world. He was right, usually. On a family trip, which really meant a trip where I was the logistics manager for 8 other people, I would be frantically checking confirmation emails, texting coordination plans, or apologizing to a maitre d' for my father's rudeness. But here, my hands were empty. My phone was on the kitchen counter, charging. I was just here. I was a mother, not a concierge. From the pool below, a sound drifted up that made my chest tighten. It was a laugh, a loud, raucous, unchecked belly laugh. It was Henry. I looked down. Evan was tossing a waterproof football to him, and Henry had just made a diving catch into the water. He surfaced, shaking his hair like a wet dog, roaring with laughter. I leaned against the railing, watching him. At my parents' house, Henry was a ghost. He was polite. He sat still. He laughed only when it was appropriate, a dry, short sound that signaled compliance, not joy. He knew that around his grandfather, being too loud or too much was an invitation for criticism. But here, in this water that I had paid for with my own hard work, he was taking up space. He was loud. He was 13. He was free. "He looks happy," I said softly. I turned to see Sophie standing next to me. She had a flower tucked behind her ear, a bright pink hibiscus she had found by the driveway. "He is," I said. "Are you happy?" Soph? She looked at the ocean. I like that we do not have to wear fancy clothes for dinner, she said seriously. No fancy clothes, I promised. Swimsuits are formal wear here. I went back inside to get some water, and that was when I saw the phone screen light up. It was not a call. It was another notification from my identity protection app. The peace of the jungle momentarily shattered. I picked up the device, my thumb hovering over the glass. Credit inquiry. Blocked. Source. Quick Cash Loans. Payday Advance. Location. Strip Mall. Route 9. Cedar Hollow. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. Despite the tropical heat, they were desperate. The first attempt at the bank had failed because I had frozen the major credit bureaus during the layover in Houston. Now, they were scraping the bottom of the barrel. They were trying to get a payday loan in my name at one of those predatory storefronts that sit next to liquor stores and pawn shops. It was pathetic. And it was dangerous. I sat down on a bar stool and opened my laptop. I did not cry. I did not panic. I went into Iron Marrow mode. I logged into every single financial institution I was associated with. I changed passwords. I set up verbal passcodes that required a specific answer. The name of my first pet was not Fluffy, before any operator could access the account. I turned my digital life into a fortress. I was reclaiming my name for 40 years. Aurora Evans had been a signature on a check for someone else's benefit. Now, it was mine. Just as I closed the laptop, the phone rang. It was an unknown number. The area code was from Ohio. I knew I should not answer. I knew the healthy thing to do was to let it go to voicemail, but a part of me, the part that still needed to sever the final nerve, pressed the green button. Hello? Aurora. It was my mother. Her voice was not the screeching siren from the airport voicemail. It was trembling, wet, and thick with tears. It was the voice she used when she wanted to play the martyr. Mom, I said, I am on vacation. Vacation? She choked out. Your father is sitting in the kitchen with his head in his hands. Do you know what you have done? Do you have any idea the shame we went through today? I imagine it was difficult when the card declined, I said calmly. It was not just the card, she wailed. We had to take a taxi home. Aurora, a taxi, Mrs. Gable saw us loading our luggage into a yellow cab like common tourists, and then, she paused for dramatic effect. Then your father had to call Trent? I raised an eyebrow, even though she could not see me. Trent? He had to ask your brother for money to cover the cancellation fees and the taxi, she sobbed. Trent does not have money. Aurora, you know that. He had to use his rent money. Your father had to beg his son for cash. It was humiliating. He is humiliated. I looked out the window. I saw Evan lifting Jasper onto his shoulders in the pool. I saw Sophie doing a cannonball. Humiliation is not my problem, Mom, I said. If Dad is humiliated, perhaps he should have thought about that before he announced to a room full of people that my children were a burden he did not want to carry. He didn't mean it like that, she protested instantly. He was just being practical. You are so sensitive. You always twist things. We just wanted a nice trip for the family, and you ruined it. You destroyed it because you are selfish. I am selfish? I asked. I felt a laugh bubbling up, but it was a dark, sharp thing. I have paid $38,000 in the last 12 months for your lifestyle. I checked the ledger. I have receipts for every dinner, every flight, every hotel room. That is what families do, she snapped, her sorrow instantly replaced by entitlement. We raised you. We sacrificed for you. And I have paid you back, I said, with interest. But the payments stopped on Sunday. I am done buying my way into a family that puts me at the kids' table. You are hurting your father, she hissed. His blood pressure. Goodbye, Mom, I said. Do not you hang up on me. If you do not turn that card back on, I swear. Aurora. I ended the call. I blocked the number. I sat there for a moment, listening to the silence of the house. My hands were shaking slightly, but not from guilt. It was the adrenaline of finally saying the words out loud. Evan walked in, a towel draped over his shoulders, dripping water onto the tile floor. He looked at me, saw the phone in my hand, and saw the look in my eyes. "They called?" he asked. "Mom," I said. Dad had to borrow money from Trent for the taxi. She said it was humiliating. Evan scoffed. He walked over to the fridge and grabbed a cold beer. He cracked it open, the sound sharp and satisfying. "They are not humiliated because they missed a trip with their grandchildren," Evan said, looking me dead in the eye. "They are humiliated because the ATM stopped dispensing cash. They are panicked about the money. Aurora, not the relationship. They haven't asked about the kids once, have they?" I shook my head. "No, not once." "That is your answer," he said. He was right. It hurt, like a physical blow to the ribs. But it was the truth, and the truth, while painful, was clean. It was not infected like the lies I had been living with. I stood up and walked out to the patio. The sun was fully set now, and the sky was a bruised purple and black, lit by 1,000 stars that we never saw in Cleveland. The kids were toweling off, shivering slightly in the evening breeze but buzzing with energy. "Dinner," I called out. "Who wants tacos?" "Me," Jasper yelled. "I could eat 10, Henry claimed. We sat around the outdoor table. We ate fish tacos made from snapper caught that morning. We drank fruit juice and listened to the jungle come alive with the sounds of insects and night birds. I looked at my 3 children. I looked at Henry, who was telling a story about a video game without fear of being interrupted. I looked at Sophie, who was laughing with her mouth open. I looked at Jasper, who had fallen asleep with a half-eaten chip in his hand. "Listen to me," I said, and Henry and Sophie stopped eating to look at me. "I want you guys to know something. We are not in Costa Rica to make Grandma and Grandpa mad. We are not here to get back at them." Henry looked skeptical. "Really?" "Really," I said. "We are here because this is what a family does. We go places together. No one gets left behind. No one is a drag. No one is a burden. You are my team. And from now on, I am only playing for this team." Sophie reached out and touched my hand. "I like this team better," she whispered. I squeezed her fingers. "Me too." Later that night, after the kids were in bed, the house settled into a deep, tropical quiet. Evan was reading on the couch. I decided to check my email one last time before disconnecting for the night. There was one new message. It had bypassed the spam filter because it was from an address I had emailed thousands of times over the years. From Robert Evans. Subject: Consequences. I hesitated. I could delete it. I could ignore it. But I needed to know the extent of the war I was fighting. I clicked open. The message was short. It was written in all caps. My father's preferred method of conveying authority when he felt his power slipping away. "Aurora, you think you are smart. You think you can cut us off and run away to the jungle. But you forgot something. You forgot whose name is on the deed to the house you are living in. You forgot about the agreement we signed 5 years ago. If you do not unfreeze the cards and transfer $10,000 by tomorrow morning to cover our losses, you will regret it. I will make sure you have no home to come back to. Dad." I stared at the screen. The sounds of the jungle seemed to stop. The deed. I felt a cold dread pool in my stomach. He was talking about the house, my house, the house Evan and I had renovated with our own hands, the house where my children grew up. I had forgotten, 5 years ago. When we refinanced to get the capital for Iron Marrow, my credit score had taken a temporary hit from student loans. Dad had offered to help. He had co-signed. He had put his name on the paperwork to get us the better rate. I had thought it was a kindness. I realize now, sitting in the dark of a Costa Rican villa, that it was not a kindness. It was a trap, and he had just sprung it. The transition from the humid, salt-heavy air of Costa Rica back to the gray, damp chill of Ohio felt like walking into a freezer. We had taken a red-eye flight, landed in Cleveland at 6 in the morning, and driven home in a silence that was not awkward, but protective. We were holding on to the peace we had found in the jungle, trying to shield it from the reality we knew was waiting for us. I turned the SUV onto our street. The leaves were turning brown, scraping against the asphalt. It was a Tuesday morning. The neighborhood was quiet, except for the one thing I had dreaded seeing. Parked in my driveway, blocking the path to the garage, was my father's Buick. It sat there like a tank. It was a civilized ambush. They knew we were coming back today. They knew exactly when to strike. They were not here to welcome us home. They were here to reestablish the hierarchy. "Stay in the car," Evan said, his hand instinctively going to the door handle. "No," I said. I put the car in park and turned off the engine. "If you go out there, they will make it about you. They will say you are controlling me. This has to be me." I turned to the back seat. Henry had taken his headphones off. Sophie looked scared. Jasper was clutching his stuffed dinosaur. "Listen to me," I said, my voice calm but firm. "I am going to go talk to Grandma and Grandpa. I want you guys to go through the side gate and go straight into the backyard. Do not stop. Do not say hello. Just go inside the back door and go to your rooms. Do you understand?" "Are they going to yell?" Henry asked. "Probably," I said, "but they are not going to yell at you. Go." I unlocked the doors. Evan ushered the kids out the side, shielding them with his body as they ran across the lawn toward the fence. I watched them disappear safely behind the house before I took a deep breath, opened my door, and stepped out onto the driveway. The front door of the Buick opened. My father stepped out first. He was wearing his business casual attire, slacks and a polo shirt, the uniform he wore when he wanted to intimidate someone. My mother followed, clutching a tissue in her hand. Trent was driving. He stayed in the driver's seat for a moment, drumming his fingers on the wheel. Before reluctantly getting out, I walked to the edge of the porch stairs and stopped. I did not invite them in. I crossed my arms over my chest. I closed the front door behind me. Hearing the latch click, that click was a boundary. They were not crossing it. "You are back," Dad said. He did not say hello. He checked his watch. "You are late." "We are right on time," I said. My mother burst into tears. It was instantaneous. A performance switch being flipped. "Look at you," she sobbed, waving the tissue at me. "Look at how cold you are. You have changed. Aurora, you used to be so sweet. You used to care about us." "I still care," I said. "I care enough to stop enabling you." "Enabling?" Dad stepped forward, his face flushing a dark, angry red. "Is that what you call it? You call it enabling when a daughter supports her family? You call it enabling when you leave your parents stranded at an airport like beggars?" "It was a childish stunt." "Aurora, you acted like a petulant teenager." "I acted like a bank," I corrected him. "And the bank closed. You told me at dinner that my children were a burden. You said they would slow you down. So I removed the burden. I removed myself, my kids, and my money." "We didn't mean it like that," Mom wailed. She looked at Evan, who had just come around the corner of the house and was standing by the garage, silent and watchful. She pointed a shaking finger at him. "It is him, isn't it? He put you up to this. He has been poisoning you against us for years. He is jealous because we are close." "Stop," I said. My voice was not loud, but it whipped through the air like a lash. "Do not bring Evan into this. He begged me to keep paying for years because he didn't want to see me hurt. This is me, Mom. This is 100% me." "After everything we've done for you," Dad said, shaking his head in mock disappointment. "We raised you. We put a roof over your head. We gave you values." I laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound. "Values? You taught me that my value was directly tied to my credit limit." "That is ungrateful," Dad spat. "Okay," I said, stepping down one stair so I was on their level. "Let's play a game. Name one thing. Name one single interaction we have had in the last 5 years where I did not pay for something. Name one dinner where you picked up the check. Name one visit where you didn't ask for a loan or a favor. Go ahead. I will wait. The silence that followed was suffocating. A crow cawed from the telephone wire above us. A car drove past slowly, the neighbors slowing down to gawk at the scene. My parents looked at each other. They searched their memories, desperately looking for a moment of pure, transactional-free affection. They found nothing. We babysat Jasper that one time, Mom stammered. And I paid you, I reminded her. I gave you $200 for gas and trouble, because you complained that he was too energetic. Mom looked down at her shoes. Then Trent cleared his throat. He walked around the front of the Buick, hands in his pockets, putting on his best peacemaker smile. Okay, look, Trent said, holding up his hands. Everyone is emotional. We get it. Aurora, you made your point. Seriously, message received. But Dad is out a lot of money for the deposits, and the cancellation fees are brutal. Maybe we can just work something out? You unlock the cards, we refinance the debt, and we move on. We are family, right? I looked at my brother. He looked tired. He also looked like he was worried about his own cash flow drying up now that the main well was capped. The deposit, I said, latching onto his words. You mean the $3,000 to the tour company? Yeah, Trent said, nodding eagerly. Dad put that down on Saturday so we wouldn't lose the spots. It is non-refundable. I froze. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Saturday? I asked. The dinner was on Sunday. Trent's smile faltered. He realized, too late, what he had just said. He looked at Dad, then back at me. Well, yeah. You know how these tours are. They fill up fast. I looked at my father. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. You booked it on Saturday, I said, my voice barely a whisper. You put down the deposit on Saturday. You excluded us before you even announced the trip. You sat there at dinner, drinking my wine, eating my food, pretending you were announcing a plan, but you had already finalized the itinerary. You had already decided Henry, Sophie, and Jasper weren't coming. You just needed to announce it to make sure I kept the card active for the rest of the payments. Dad didn't deny it. He just set his jaw, his eyes hard and unrepentant. Someone had to make the executive decision. You are too soft with those kids. They would have been miserable. You stole from me, I said. You used my card to book a trip you knew I wasn't invited to. It is not stealing if you are an authorized user, Dad shouted, losing his composure. It is family money. It is my money, I yelled back, finally letting the anger break through. I earned it. I worked for it. And you are done spending it. I took a breath. Centering myself, I looked at the three of them. My past, my origin story, my tormentors. Here is the deal, I said. I have one condition, only one. We need the money transferred by noon, Dad demanded. No, I said. I am not talking about money. If you ever want to see my children again, if you ever want to step foot in this house again, you will apologize. You will walk into that backyard. You will look Henry, Sophie, and Jasper in the eye, and you will tell them you are sorry. You will tell them they are not a burden. You will tell them you were wrong. I pointed to the side gate. Go ahead. They are waiting. The air hung heavy between us. It was the ultimate test. It cost them $0 to apologize. It cost them nothing but their pride. Mom looked at the gate. She looked torn. She took half a step, but Dad grabbed her arm. His grip was tight. He pulled her back. We are not going to apologize to children, he sneered. That is ridiculous. They are children. They do not understand anything. They understand that you chose a free vacation over them, I said. I am not going to beg, Dad said, buttoning his jacket, and I am not going to let you dictate terms to me. Aurora, you forget who you are talking to. I am talking to a man who just lost his daughter, I said. I turned around. I reached for the doorknob. I was done. There was nothing left to say. Aurora, Dad barked. I stopped, but I didn't turn around. You think you have all the power because you changed a few passwords? His voice dropped low, vibrating with a menace I had never heard before. You think you can just kick us out of your life? He laughed, a dark, ugly sound. You really didn't read the fine print on that loan modification 5 years ago, did you? I felt a cold stone drop in my stomach. The email from Costa Rica flashed in my mind. You forget whose name is on the deed to this house, he said. It is not just yours, Aurora, it is ours. Joint tenancy with rights of survivorship. And if you do not turn those cards back on, I am going to force a partition sale. I will sell this house out from under you and your children before the week is out. He waited for me to crumple. He waited for the fear to work. I turned my head slightly. Get off my driveway, I said. You have 24 hours, he said. He got back into the Buick. The doors slammed. The engine roared to life. I watched them back out, leaving tire marks on the pavement. I stood there for a long time, staring at the empty street, realizing that the war had just moved from the bank account to the very ground I was standing on. The threat about the house deed did not make me scream. It made me silent. It was the specific kind of silence that comes when you realize the monster under the bed is not imaginary. It is lying there with a signed contract. I walked back into the house. The kids were in the kitchen with Evan, eating cereal as if the world outside hadn't just tilted on its axis. I kissed the top of Jasper's head, touched Evan's shoulder to let him know I was alive, and walked straight to my home office. I locked the door. For the next 4 hours, I became an archaeologist of my own financial ruin. I pulled down the dusty accordion files from the top shelf of the closet. I opened my laptop and logged into the cloud storage where I kept old emails. I was looking for a ghost. I was looking for the moment I had signed away my safety. It took me 45 minutes to find the email thread. It was dated 5 years ago. Subject: Help. Urgent refinance docs. From Robert Evans to Aurora Evans. I remembered the day. I was at the hardware store, dealing with a supplier who had shorted us on lumber. Dad had called, frantic. He said they were doing a strategic restructure of their assets to help with retirement planning. But because of a glitch with his credit report regarding a disputed medical bill, he needed a co-signer to get the prime interest rate. He said it was just for 6 months. He said his name would be primary. He said I was just a character witness on paper. I opened the attachment. It was a PDF titled loan_modification_final_v3.pdf. I didn't just read it this time. I dissected it. I read the fine print that I had skimmed 5 years ago because I trusted the man who taught me how to ride a bike. There it was. Page 42, paragraph C, subsection 4. Joint tenancy with rights of survivorship. My father wasn't lying. His name was on the deed to my house, but as I read further, my stomach turned into a knot of cold lead. It wasn't just that his name was on it. It was the liability clause. I had not just added him to the deed. I had effectively collateralized my home against his debts in a cross-collateralization agreement buried in the addendum. If he defaulted on his loans, the bank could come for my house. I picked up the phone. My hands were steady, but my heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I dialed the number for our family attorney, a woman named Sarah, who had helped Evan and me with the business incorporation. "Sarah," I said when she answered, "I need you to look at a document. I am sending it now. Tell me I'm reading this wrong." 10 minutes later, Sarah called back. Her voice was professional, but I could hear the pity in it. "You aren't reading it wrong, Aurora," she said. "Technically, he is a co-owner. He can force a partition sale if he wants to liquidate his share. But," she paused, "there is something else here. Look at the date of the signature on the amendment regarding the primary liability." I looked. October 12th, 2021. "And look at the notary stamp," Sarah said. I zoomed in. The stamp was from a notary in Cedar Hollow. "Aurora," Sarah said softly, "were you in Cedar Hollow on October 12th? I checked my calendar archive. "No, I was at a trade show in Chicago." I have the flight receipts. Then you didn't sign that amendment, Sarah said. Someone forged your signature to add the cross-collateralization clause. I stared at the screen. The signature looked like mine. It had the same loop on the A, but the date. I was 400 miles away. They forged it, I whispered, to use my house as leverage for their other debts. This changes things, Sarah said. This isn't just a civil dispute anymore. This is fraud. But we need to be sure before we drop the hammer. Do not tell them you know. Not yet. I hung up. The betrayal was so absolute it felt physical. They hadn't just used me for cash flow. They had set me up as the fall guy for a financial collapse they knew was coming. I went back to the emails. I started searching for other dates, other requests. I found a thread from 3 years ago. Subject: quick favor. Need ID for booking. My mother had asked for a photo of my driver's license and social security card because the travel agent needs to verify you for the family discount on the insurance. I had sent it. I had sent it without a second thought. I cross-referenced that date with the credit inquiry log I had pulled yesterday. 2 days after I sent that email, an application for a high-limit credit card was submitted in my name. It was denied because of a typo in the address. But the attempt was there. They had been practicing. They had been trying to steal my identity for years, just waiting for the right moment when they needed a massive injection of cash. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from Facebook. Kendra had posted. I didn't follow her anymore, but a mutual cousin had shared it. I clicked the link. It was a video of Kendra, crying in her car. The caption read, "Heartbroken. When family turns on family, some people get rich and forget who raised them. My parents are devastated. They just wanted to take us on a dream trip, and my sister ruined it out of jealousy. Please pray for my dad. His heart can't take this stress." The comments were flooding in. So selfish. Money changes people. Stay strong. Kendra. She was spinning the narrative. She was painting me as the villain, the greedy daughter who abandoned her elderly parents because she didn't want to share her wealth. Not a single person asked why my children weren't invited. Not a single person asked who was paying for the trip. I felt the urge to type a furious response. I wanted to post the screenshots of the declined transactions. I wanted to post the voicemail where Mom worried about Mrs. Gable instead of her grandkids. But I stopped. "Evan," I called out. He came into the office. "What is it?" "Do not post anything," I said. "Do not defend me. Do not comment on Kendra's video." "I saw it," he said, his jaw tight. "It is a lie." "I know," I said, "but we are not fighting with comments. We are fighting with paper." I turned back to the printer. I hit print. I printed the unauthorized user history. I printed the concierge invoices. I printed the timeline of the loans that were never repaid. I printed the forged loan document. I printed the email asking for my ID. I organized them into a binder. It was 3 inches thick. It was the autopsy report of a family that had died long ago. Then, I opened a new email draft. I typed the recipients: Dad, Mom, Kendra, Trent, subject, the meeting. I am done negotiating over the phone. I am done with the driveway ambushes. If you want to talk about the house, the money, or the future of this family, we will meet, tomorrow, 10 in the morning, at the Iron Marrow Conference Room, not your house, not mine, neutral ground. Bring your financial records. I am bringing mine, Aurora. I hit send. I sat back, rubbing my temples. The room was quiet, filled only with the hum of the printer cooling down. I felt like I had just run a marathon, but I wasn't done. I had one more box to check. In the process of reviewing the credit card statements, the ones I had paid blindly for years, I had noticed a recurring charge. It was small, $99 a month. It was listed as TGV Partners, LLC. I had always assumed it was some sort of insurance or maybe a subscription Dad had forgotten to cancel. But now, with my eyes open, I looked closer. I copied the merchant name into a search engine, TGV Partners, LLC. The first result was a generic holding company, but the second result, The second result was a forum post on a consumer watchdog site. Warning: TG V Partners is the billing shell for The Golden Voyage, a multi-level marketing scheme targeting retirees with the promise of luxury travel investment returns. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. I clicked the link, The Golden Voyage. It wasn't a travel agency, it was an investment scam. Invest in our luxury timeshare portfolio and travel the world for free while earning passive income. I went back to the bank statements. I searched for larger amounts. There it was. 6 months ago. A wire transfer for $25,000 from the joint account my father shared with my mother, an account I had deposited emergency funds into earlier that year. The recipient was TGV Partners. My breath caught in my throat. They weren't just going to Europe for a vacation. They weren't just showing off. My father had invested their entire nest egg and a significant chunk of my money into a Ponzi scheme. The trip to Europe wasn't a holiday. It was a shareholder summit. They had to go. If they didn't go, if they didn't bring new investors, maybe Trent, maybe Kendra's boyfriend, they would lose their status. They would lose everything. They weren't panicking because I cut off their fun. They were panicking because without my credit card to mask the losses, the house of cards wasn't just falling. It was already on fire. And they needed the deed to my house to put it out. The conference room at Iron Marrow Supply is designed to intimidate. It has floor-to-ceiling glass walls, a table made of reclaimed industrial steel that weighs nearly 600 pounds, and chairs that are comfortable but force you to sit upright. It is a room where I negotiate with suppliers who try to gouge me on concrete prices. It is a room for business, and that is exactly why I chose it. My parents, Kendra, and Trent walked in at 10 o'clock sharp. They looked out of place against the backdrop of architectural blueprints and safety gear. Dad was wearing his Sunday suit, a navy blue number that had grown a little tight around the waist. He walked in with his chest puffed out, expecting to take the chair at the head of the table. I was already sitting there. Evan was sitting to my right. He had a notepad open. He did not look up when they entered. "Sit," I said, gesturing to the 4 empty chairs on the opposite side. "This is ridiculous," Dad muttered, but he sat down. He sat in the first seat on the left. "Dragging us to your office like we are employees. We are your parents, Aurora. You are currently petitioners," I said, folding my hands on top of the 3-inch binder I had prepared. "And we are here because you threatened to sell my house. So, let us skip the pleasantries." "I did not threaten," Dad said, smoothing his tie. "I stated a fact. I am a co-owner. I have rights." "We will get to your rights," I said. "But first, we are going to talk about why you are really going to Europe." I opened the binder. I didn't slide the paper across the table. I held it up. It was a printout of the logo for TGV Partners, LLC. The color drained from my father's face so fast, it looked like a physical shutter closing. Trent frowned, looking between me and Dad. Kendra was busy trying to look bored, scrolling on her phone under the table. "I know what this is," I said. "The Golden Voyage. It is not a travel agency. Dad, it is a wealth-building travel community. That is what they call it, right? You invest a lump sum, $25,000, which you wired 6 months ago, and in exchange, you get exclusive investment opportunities and status in their platinum tier." "You do not know what you are talking about," Dad snapped. But his voice lacked its usual boom. It was thin. "The trip to Europe," I continued, ignoring him. "It is not a family vacation. It is the annual shareholder summit. You have to go. You have to show up to maintain your tier status, and more importantly, you have to show up looking successful. You told them you were bringing the whole family, didn't you? You told them you were treating everyone. You needed to walk into that hotel in Rome looking like the patriarch of a wealthy dynasty to impress your partners." I leaned forward. "That is why you panicked at the airport. It wasn't about Mrs. Gable seeing the card decline. It was about the fact that without my credit line, you can't afford the suite. You can't afford the champagne dinners, And if you show up looking broke, the other investors will smell blood. You need me to be the prop that holds up your house of cards." Trent looked at Dad. "Is that true? Is that where the retirement money went?" "Shut up, Trent," Dad hissed. Then he turned his glare on me. "You are twisting everything. It is a legitimate investment. I did it for us. For the legacy." "There is no legacy," I said, my voice rising for the first time. "There is only debt, and you were using my credit card to hide it." "You are going to lose this family," Dad said. He pointed a finger at me, the same finger he had used to exclude my children at dinner. "You keep pushing this, Aurora, and you will be alone. No parents, no siblings, just you and him." He jerked his head toward Evan. "A family that has no room for my children is not a family I want to keep," I replied. "You made your choice at the dinner table. You chose the appearance of wealth over the reality of your grandsons." My mother, who had been twisting a handkerchief in her hands, suddenly let out a sob. She looked up at me with tear-filled eyes. "How can you be so cruel?" she wept. "Your father, his heart, the doctor said he needs to avoid stress. You are killing him. Aurora, if he has a heart attack right here, it will be on your conscience." I slammed my hand down on the steel table. The sound rang out like a gunshot. Everyone jumped. Even Kendra looked up from her phone. "Stop it," I commanded. "Do not use his health to buy my submission. I have played that game for 20 years. Every time I say no, suddenly someone has chest pains. Every time I set a boundary, someone has a migraine. It ends today. His health is his responsibility. My finances are mine." I opened the binder to the second tab. "I have 3 conditions," I said. "They are non-negotiable. If you agree to them, I will not file a police report for identity theft regarding the loan document forgery. If you refuse, I walk out of here and go straight to the district attorney." "Identity theft?" Kendra scoffed. "You are delusional. Condition 1, I said, ignoring her. "You will immediately cease all attempts to open credit cards, loans, or lines of credit in my name. You will sign a document today, prepared by my lawyer, acknowledging that you have no claim to my credit history. Condition 2, I continued. You will acknowledge, in writing, the $25,000 you took from the joint account as a debt owed to the estate, and you will agree to a repayment plan, even if it is $50 a month. I want the paper trail." "And condition 3, I said, softening my voice just a fraction, though my eyes remained hard. "You will apologize to Henry, Sophie, and Jasper. Not a text, not a generic, 'sorry.' You will sit them down and tell them that you were wrong to say they were a burden. You will tell them that they are wanted." Dad sat back. Crossing his arms, he looked like a petulant child. "I am not apologizing to children. It undermines my authority." "You have no authority," I shot back. "You are spending money you do not have to impress people you do not like." "I have proof," Kendra suddenly blurted out. We all turned to her. She realized she had spoken too loud. "I mean, about the dinner. You keep saying Dad was mean. But I have the video. He was joking. You just took it too seriously because you are sensitive." I looked at my sister. She had just handed me the weapon I needed. "You have the video?" I asked. "The one you were filming for your social media? The one where you wanted to show off the big announcement?" "Yeah," Kendra said, looking smug. "And it shows you being a buzzkill." "Send it to me," I said. "What?" "Send me the raw video file." "Right now, airdrop it." "Why would I do that?" she sneered. "Because that video proves my point." "Kendra," I said. "It proves Dad said the words, 'minus you and the kids.' It proves he said, 'You will slow us down, and if we end up in court over a partition sale of my house.' I will need that video to prove the hostile intent and the pattern of emotional abuse that invalidates his claim to equitable partnership in the home. If you do not give it to me, I will subpoena your phone and you will lose access to it for months." Kendra's eyes went wide. She looked at Dad. He looked furious. But he didn't tell her to stop. He knew I was right. The video was the smoking gun of his cruelty. "Send it," I repeated. Reluctantly, she tapped her screen. A moment later, my phone buzzed on the table. Incoming file. I accepted it. I didn't watch it. I just saved it to 3 different cloud accounts immediately. "Now," I said, turning back to Dad. "The apology and the signatures." Dad stood up. He scraped his chair back violently. He placed his hands on the table and leaned over, trying to loom over me. "You think you have won," he shouted, his face turning that dangerous shade of purple again. "You think because you have a fancy office and a lawyer that you can dictate terms to me? I am your father. I brought you into this world. I can take you out of it. You are nothing without me. I will sue you for the house. I will tell everyone what an ungrateful brat you are. I will ruin your reputation in this town." He was screaming now. Spittle was flying from his lips. Mom was crying into her hands. I remained seated. I did not flinch. I waited for him to run out of breath. When he finally stopped, panting, glaring at me with pure hatred, I reached into the very back of the binder. I pulled out a single sheet of paper. "I expected you to say that," I said quietly. I slid the paper across the steel table. It stopped right under his nose. It was a transaction confirmation from the bank's fraud department. "Tuesday night," I said, reading the details from my own copy. 11:45 p.m., Cedar Hollow Gas and Go on Route 9, attempted cash advance, $500, followed 3 minutes later by a credit application via a mobile device. I looked up at him. "And here is the interesting part. Dad, the bank captured the IP address and the device ID of the phone used to submit that fraudulent application. It matches the device ID of the phone currently sitting in your jacket pocket." The room went deathly silent. The hum of the refrigerator in the corner sounded like a jet engine. "That is federal wire fraud," I said. "An attempted identity theft. It carries a prison sentence of up to 30 years. Dad looked down at the paper. His hands started to shake. He collapsed back into his chair, the fight draining out of him like water from a smashed vase. "So," I said, clicking my pen, "are we signing the papers or should I call the police?" The silence in the conference room was heavy, pressing down on us like a physical weight. My father stared at the transaction report, his face a mask of crumbling denial. The evidence was irrefutable. It was not just a suspicion anymore. It was a digital fingerprint that linked his greed directly to a felony. "It was a misunderstanding," Dad mumbled, his voice losing its usual booming resonance. He pushed the paper away as if it were contaminated. "A technical glitch. I was just checking the balance to see if the system was working again. I did not mean to submit an application. My thumb slipped." I looked at him with a calmness that frightened me. "Understandings do not happen at 11:45 at night," I said, my voice steady. "Glitches do not walk into a gas station, and thumbs do not accidentally type in a social security number, a maiden name, and an annual income figure into a secure banking app. That takes intent, Dad. That takes desperation." Trent, who had been quiet, suddenly sat up straighter. He looked at the paper, then at Dad. For the first time in his life, the smirk was gone. He realized that this was not just family drama. This was a criminal record. If Dad went down for fraud, the legacy Trent was waiting to inherit would be nothing but legal fees and shame. "Dad," Trent said, his voice cracking. "What did you do? You tried to open a card in her name? That is serious. That is jail time." "I was doing it for us," Dad snapped, slamming his hand on the table. But the gesture looked weak. "To save the investment. If we lose the status, we lose the principal." Mom let out a wail, burying her face in her hands. "Oh God, the neighbors, if the police come." "Aurora, please, you cannot do this to us. We are old. We made a mistake. What are you going to do to us?" She looked at me, her eyes pleading, but she was asking the wrong question. She was asking about her punishment, not about my pain. I am not going to do anything to you, I said. I am going to do right by my children. I reached into the binder and pulled out the final document. It was a formal agreement drafted by my lawyer. You have two choices, I said, laying the document on the steel table. Option A. You sign this. It states that you acknowledge the debt of $25,000. It states that you have no claim to my home, regardless of the deed language, due to the fraudulent nature of the loan modification, and it creates a permanent legal no-contact order regarding my finances. You cut me loose, completely. And option B? Trent asked, sweating. Option B, I said, picking up my phone. I walk out of this room. I drive 3 blocks to the police station, and I file the report. I hand them this IP match. I hand them the forged signature on the loan doc. And I let the legal system decide what a technical glitch is worth in prison years. The room was silent. The hum of the air conditioner seemed deafening. But there is one more thing, I added. I looked at Evan. He nodded and stood up. He walked to the door of the conference room and opened it. You can come in now, he called out softly. Henry, Sophie, and Jasper walked in. They looked small in the large, industrial space. They were holding cups of hot chocolate Evan had gotten them from the break room. They stopped near the door, standing close to Evan, looking at their grandparents with a mixture of curiosity and wariness. I saw Dad stiffen. I saw Mom wipe her eyes, trying to compose herself. I do not want an apology, I told my parents. Your apologies to me mean nothing because you only offer them when you are caught. But if you want to walk out of here without a police escort, you are going to talk to them. I pointed to my children. You are going to look them in the eye, I said, and you are going to tell them that you were wrong. You are going to tell them that they are not a burden. You are going to tell them that they matter. This was the test. It was the final exam of their humanity. I wasn't asking for money. I wasn't asking for the house. I was asking them to put their pride aside for 30 seconds to heal the wound they had inflicted on 3 innocent children. Dad stood up slowly. He looked at Henry. Henry looked back, his chin raised, not looking away. Dad opened his mouth. He looked at the papers on the table, then at me, then at the kids. His face turned red. The veins in his neck bulged. He was fighting a war between his ego and his survival. Dad started. He coughed. We are going to go now. He couldn't do it. He physically could not bring himself to humble himself before a 13-year-old boy. He grabbed his jacket. He grabbed the pen. He scribbled his signature on the legal document with a violent, scratching motion. There, he spat, throwing the pen down. You have your house. You have your money. Are you happy? He walked past the children without even looking at them. He walked out the door. My heart broke. Not for me, but for the hope I had secretly held on to. I looked at Mom. She was trembling. She walked over to the kids. She stopped in front of Sophie. Oh, sweetie, Mom said, her voice wavering. Grandma loves you. You know that, right? We are so stressed. If you felt bad about the trip, well, Grandma is sorry you felt that way. We never meant to make you sad. I stepped in between her and Sophie like a shield. No, I said firmly. That is not an apology. I am sorry you felt that way is not an apology. That is you blaming a 10-year-old for having feelings. Mom looked at me, shocked. I am trying. You are trying to save face, I said. Goodbye, Mom. She looked at me, then at the kids. She saw the wall I had built. She saw that the access was gone. She signed the paper with a shaking hand, sobbing quietly, and followed Dad and Trent out the door. The heavy glass door clicked shut behind them. The silence that followed was not heavy. It was light. It was the feeling of a room when a loud, buzzing noise finally stops. I looked at my kids. Henry walked over to the table and looked at the signature on the paper. Is it over? He asked. Yes, I said. It is over. They cannot take the house. They cannot take our money, and they cannot make you feel small ever again. Jasper walked over and tugged on my sleeve. Does this mean we can go back to the beach? I laughed, and tears finally spilled over my cheeks. We can go anywhere we want, buddy. We did not go back to the beach immediately. We went home, but it felt like a different house. The ghost of my father's name was gone from the deed. The shadow of their expectations was gone from the hallways. That night, we had a re-inauguration dinner. It was just us, me, Evan, Henry, Sophie, and Jasper. I made lasagna, the messy, cheesy kind that my father hated because he said it was peasant food. We set the table, we laughed, we talked about the monkeys in Costa Rica, we talked about Henry's math test, we talked about everything and nothing, toward the end of the meal. I brought out 3 envelopes. They were not navy blue with gold foil. They were simple white envelopes, decorated with markers and stickers. I handed one to each of the kids. "What is this?" Sophie asked. "Open it," I said. They tore them open. Inside were season passes to the local amusement park, the one my parents refused to go to because it was too crowded and loud, and on each pass, I had written a note for Henry. Because you are strong, for Sophie. Because you are creative, for Jasper. Because you are joy. Cool, Henry yelled. We can go on the roller coasters? All of them, Evan said. Until we throw up, as they cheered and planned their route through the park. I looked at the wall of the dining room. I had placed 2 wooden chairs there, pushed back against the plaster. They were empty. They used to be the places of honor. They used to be the seats where I served the people who demanded everything and gave nothing. Now, they were just furniture. "Mom," Henry asked, catching my gaze, "why are the chairs over there?" I smiled at him, raising my glass of water. "Those seats are available," I said. "But from now on, they are reserved. They are only for people who know how to love us without sending a bill." Henry smiled. He understood. We finished our dinner in the warmth of a home that was finally, truly ours, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't worried about the transaction declining. My account was full. Thank you so much for listening to this story. It was a journey of boundaries, betrayal, and finally, freedom. I would love to hear from you. Where are you listening from right now? Are you in your car, cooking dinner, or maybe hiding in the break room at work? Let me know in the comments below. I love reading your stories, and if you enjoyed seeing Aurora take her life back, please make sure to subscribe to Morgan Revenge Stories. Hit that like button to support the channel, and smash the hype button so this story can reach even more people who might need the courage to cut their own toxic ties. See you in the next story.